Welcome to Diabetes Day by Day, the American Diabetes Association's official podcast. This month, November, is American Diabetes Month. The purpose of having a whole month nationally called American Diabetes Month is to raise awareness of the importance of diabetes and the importance of both advocacy for overcoming diabetes. This month's podcast, we're going to focus on advocacy in two regards, both advocacy for others and something that we often forget as important, which is self-advocacy. I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, professor of family and community medicine in the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University. And joining me as always is my co-host.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sarah Wettergreen, an assistant professor at the University of Colorado Skaggs School of Pharmacy and an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist.
For this episode, we have two fantastic guests joining us who are diabetes advocates and influencers in the world of diabetes. First, I'd like to introduce Samantha Hildebrandt, who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes just a few years ago. Since then, she's embraced the opportunity to support others living with type 1 diabetes and has created a website, a podcast, and a community called Type 1 Tribe. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us today is Cheria Moore, who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at age 29. Through self-empowerment and support from her community, she made changes that allowed her to lose weight and have her type 2 diabetes go into remission. Since then, she shared her story through social media, her blog, and through the media to empower others. Welcome, Cheria.
Thank you for having me.
Cheria, let's start by diving a bit deeper into your story, because our personal stories, when we're brave enough to share them, are often so inspiring to others. Can you please share the story of how you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes?
Yes, of course. So on September 13th of 2021, I was coming out of the pandemic, going back into work full time. My mom had gone into remission with her cancer. And as a result, I had begun to eat my feelings and was 311 pounds. So right before I started a fitness journey, I went in to get a checkup, just the typical lab work, and was thinking everything was going to be normal and was ready to start my healthier lifestyle when they told me that my A1C was at 8% and that I was diabetic. And they thought I knew, but it wasn't until I burst out in tears that they were like, oh my goodness, you didn't know. And I said, of course I didn't know. And it was in that moment that became the catalyst that I needed to change the trajectory of where my life was headed, because I had always used food to cope with my emotions. So when I received that diagnosis, of course I was devastated, but I had to learn the disease, start doing the work, taking the classes. And I also joined a diet program that helped me follow a diabetes tailored plan and create a healthier lifestyle. And as a result, I've lowered my A1C.
Cheria, can I ask you a question? And first, just thank you so much for sharing, because when we share about ourselves, there's a certain vulnerability to it that takes courage to do. And when I'm listening, courage is what the word that comes to my mind. And what I'm interested in is, under such devastating circumstances, your mom having had cancer recently, thank God now in remission, you now having this diagnosis that has a lot of impact. What is it that allowed you to dig deep and find the courage to just, in honesty and with enthusiasm, forthrightly deal with this?
I have always been a person who confronts things head on eventually. Like, even when I delay them, I know I have to face it at some point. And that's what it became for me. It really became a matter of, to be blunt, life and death. There was a study in 2019 that put people of color 2 times likely to die from diabetes, which is scary. Those facts are facts. So I had to really get to the root of do I want to live or die? Of course I want to live. I was
Wow.
29. And it was just before my 30th birthday. That's not the life I wanted for myself. I put my life on hold after graduation from in 2017 to take care of my mom. That's how I ended up in Alabama. I'm originally from Chicago,
Mm.
but here I am dealing with this. And I thought, as a Christian, God had forgotten about me because I'm like, I
Mm.
sacrificed my career, my dreams, put them on hold to take care of somebody else. And now here I am confronting my own issues of emotional eating, the terrifying realization that I'm diabetic, and it is hereditary. My dad is diabetic as well, but I had the preconceived notion that I had more time. I thought, it didn't affect people my age, at least until I was like up there, but really it knows no race, no age, no certain parts of the world. It's everywhere. So that's what I had to realize.
That's so well said, and it sounds like you looked at it in a way that many young people don't immediately go to, which is things that are far out in time. Just like when we look in the distance perspective, things that are far away seem small. The dangers that you read about, you really looked at again courageously and said, if I don't do something now, it's going to hurt me then. So now's the only time when I can do something about it. Let's go on, and we'll come back to some of the ways that we advocate for ourselves and others. But Samantha, can you share your story with us?
Yeah, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes February 18th of 2021. I had all of the classic symptoms, extreme thirst, weight loss, frequent urination, loss of eyesight. I was tired and I had leg cramps. I did not, unfortunately, know anybody that had type 1 diabetes, so I had no clue what these symptoms were. So I went to my primary care doctor just to figure it out. She took a blood test, and the next day she called me and told me to go to the ER. My blood sugar was 420 and my A1C was about 14.
Wow. Now, how did you feel when you got that call?
I was very confused. I did not understand what she meant by type 1 diabetes. And when I got to the hospital, I immediately started crying because I didn't understand what was going on. I mean, they're putting all of these, things on you, IVs in you, and it's a really scary diagnosis, especially because it's not an easy disease to explain. It takes time to understand what it is. And it took me about a year to really understand what type 1 diabetes even was.
Yeah, it's interesting as I listen to both stories, you both started with the exact date when you were diagnosed. And we sometimes, Sarah, I think, forget how impactful that first discussion is of diabetes, that it's so impactful that you remember that day forever.
I agree. I feel like from other guests that we've had who shared their stories as well, pretty much everyone knows that exact date, and that just shows the impact and the lifelong consideration of this, especially with type 1 diabetes. It's something you're thinking, from here on forward, this is something that's part of my life. Neil and I on this podcast often talk about how people can live their best life with diabetes and hear stories of how people are doing that. And it seems like something that both of you have figured out how to do. You didn't let that diagnosis overcome you or maybe change who you are as an individual. It did change your life, but didn't change you. And I think both of you are such wonderful examples of how to live your best life with diabetes. So today we are focusing on advocacy since it's American Diabetes Month. It's one of our focus areas this month. And there are many types of advocacy. Being an advocate for yourself or for a family member, being an advocate for a group like those living with diabetes. Can you share some thoughts about what advocacy is and its importance? Samantha, if you can kick us off.
I believe it's sticking up for what you believe in, what you're passionate about, or what you think the world needs to know about.
Cheria, what would you say?
I would say advocacy is definitely using your voice and speaking up for a particular cause, such as diabetes. I've always been concerned about it because it was in my family, but when I received my diagnosis, it just made me want to speak more, speak louder.
Now, each of you I've seen use different platforms like podcasts, social media to share your stories, connect with others, and in my mind, in some ways, be an advocate for those living with diabetes and helping others in the public to understand what that looks like. Maybe Samantha, starting first, what inspired you to do that?
It might sound a little crazy, but the first day of my diagnosis, I got this weird like hunch that this was kind of what I was supposed to do. My whole life, I feel like I was searching for like a passion and nothing ever really stuck with me until my day of diagnosis. And from there, I started posting on social media. I created a website to build a community. I started a podcast where I interview other people living with diabetes and also specialists like endocrinologists who can give us more information. And so I really just like to give as much information as I can to others living with diabetes and families of people that have loved ones that live with diabetes, because social media has made a huge difference for me as well. When I was first diagnosed, the first thing I did is I went to Instagram and searched type 1 diabetes in the search bar, and I found other people that were living with it. And I thought, okay, they look similar to me, and it made me just feel a little bit more comfortable about living with the disease.
I think that's so useful to think about, where are people going for their information? I think from a clinician side, Neil and I see individuals who are diagnosed with diabetes. And historically, I would say healthcare providers were often the first source of information. And then with the internet, it became more Google and internet searching. And really now I think it's more social media. That's where a lot of people are getting up-to-date information on different topics. And having that personal connection can mean so much more. I feel like using a new technology or different medication can feel intimidating, but when you see other people who are doing this just like you are, you feel empowered and you feel this connection that you're part of something bigger. Cheria, can you share a little bit more about how you've shared your story too? It's been fun watching your stories on social media.
Yes, of course. So I launched my blog in 2020, and I would write about women and lifestyle empowerment, et cetera. But when I received my diagnosis, I didn't exactly jump right into the hashtags and publishing the content because I was so devastated. I actually waited about 2 months before I started blogging and sharing my journey. I told the program that I follow, the community that I built within that, Weight Watchers, I told my group, and they were very supportive, but it was such a shock that I had to take a step back emotionally. I cried a lot of the time, and I didn't even tell my siblings right away. I told my parents, but in a way, it felt like a death sentence. So it was just the shame and the embarrassment that I had to process. However, when I finally decided to take control and do something about it, between the emotional processing, I was doing the research, and I turned to medical professionals, and they offered wellness classes, which I started taking. I did try to change my eating habits, swap foods out, but it wasn't until about 2 months later that I went public, and that is when it took off for me on my blog.
It's really interesting. Sometimes when we share our story, we help ourselves, right? We intend to help others. And in return, we get something really important, the enthusiasm, Samantha, as you said, purpose. And Cheria, as you described, that's when your own self-empowerment took off. And it's a pretty amazing thing. Sarah and I have said many times that the goal of this podcast, the overriding goal, is empowerment of people with diabetes with the knowledge to how to best work with their clinicians.
And with that in mind, I have a question for each of you. I'm imagining there may be individuals who are listening to this who maybe were recently diagnosed, or maybe you've had a diagnosis of diabetes for a while and have a hard time either accepting it or continuing to move forward when we know there's so much of a mental process to this. We have diabetes distress scales. There's significant concerns of the mental game that goes into managing diabetes. For each of you, what is something you would say to that person who's struggling to help with their self-empowerment and continue to move forward? Cheria, maybe you first.
I would say that it's okay to be scared, to process your emotions, because it is life-changing and it is scary. However, it being 2023, we have better resources that they didn't have a long time ago, and that it's encouraging to stay connected and well informed on things because you are not alone.
Yeah, if you were recently diagnosed with diabetes, I think the first thing is that you're going to be okay. Because when you get that diagnosis, you think your life is ending, and it's important to know that you will be okay. And if you've been working through it, I'd also like to say that you're doing great. It's a lot of information thrown at you at once, and it's really hard to learn all of it in a short amount of time. I'm almost 3 years in, and I'm still learning things every single day. So you're doing great. Just keep doing what you're doing and trying to learn new information every single day.
Well, thanks for that. I think those messages will certainly resonate with many individuals. As we start to wrap up, I'd like to hear from each of you a little bit more around key tips for advocacy you have for individuals as well, based on your experiences. So beyond that self-empowerment, if someone wants to start their advocacy journey and moving a bit forward in that, as each of you have done, what would you recommend?
I would recommend finding a community within your city, town, whatever, and become a part of that. Follow the American Diabetes website. They have several campaigns. I think they have 34 miles in November happening right now. Get involved. Call the politicians. Get involved. Take action.
I love that, Cheria. And I think when you get connected with those local communities, if you're looking for a place to start, those who have more experience in this area, and especially in that local advocacy, can help guide you and find ways to get more engaged. Samantha?
Share wherever you're the most comfortable. I know not everybody wants to share every detail on social media. So no matter what it is, just share whatever you're comfortable with, whether that's just telling somebody about your day or diving deep into your actual blood sugar numbers, whatever it is, whatever you're comfortable with, do that.
I think there's so much bravery to that too. And following you, Samantha, I loved when you shared what happened when you ate pizza. I think that's brave to share. I think a lot of people would say like, "Oh, I'll share my numbers when they're looking good, but I don't want to share them when they're not maybe their best." But I think those who can share and feel comfortable doing so help others to just feel more comfortable as they face similar challenges. So thank you all for what you've shared today.
So we only have a few minutes left. Let's go to final thoughts for our listeners. Cheria, do you want to share some final thoughts?
Yes, I would say if you are newly diagnosed, remember that you are not alone. You have diabetes. Diabetes does not have you, and you'll be okay.
Fantastic. Samantha?
Yeah, I would say we've talked about this, but get involved as much as you can. Attend groups, attend courses, whatever it is that you can do to get involved. It makes you feel less alone if you know other people going through the same thing. So make sure to do that.
Fantastic. Sarah, your final thoughts for today.
I think this has been a wonderful discussion. I'm so grateful for each of you sharing your story and being here with us today. My final thought is if you are someone who's feeling alone and maybe it feels intimidating to reach out in the community or to connect on social media, start with your healthcare team. They're on your side. They want to advocate for you and help solve problems for you as best as they can and help direct you to other resources that might be helpful. So think of that as a place to start as well.
And to our guests, Samantha, Cheria, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having us.
Your stories are so wonderfully inspiring, and both how you both of you dealt courageously with an incredibly difficult diagnosis and turned it into something good in your life. I want to thank our audience for listening. If any members of our audience have a diabetes story you'd like to share or questions you'd like us to discuss on the podcast, please call us on our dedicated line, 703-755-7288. Again, that's 703-755-7288, and leave a message. Be sure to tune in next month when we'll be discussing something that we're all going to be dealing with, which is managing diabetes during the holidays. Remember to get involved throughout the remainder of American Diabetes Month. Stay updated on upcoming events, become a diabetes advocate yourself, and explore other engagement opportunities by visiting diabetes.org/wefight. That's again, diabetes.org/wefight. we fight. Together, let's continue fighting to end diabetes. For the American Diabetes Association, I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik. Thanks for listening.